Honey, I'm Kathy LeBlanc. I'm from Bay Mills Indian community, and I'm happy to be here at 7th Generation program in Chip, Mount Pleasant. I was given tobacco by Leanne to come down here and share what I know about one of our sacred ceremonies, our Dgwaagi. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it in two parts. Part one is about what I know about Dgwaagi, and part two is going to be about our seasonal feasts and those types of ceremonies and how we also make food offerings at that time for other reasons. I've seen them combined and all done at the same time as well, and so I guess I just want to say miigwech for the tobacco and for permission for me to share these teachings with you and also the elders that are here with their permission. I'm sure there's many elders that have knowledge of this information, and if I say anything that varies or is different from the way you taught, I think it's because each little region or area or res has their own little way of doing things, and it might vary. And I know that the intention behind what we're doing is what matters, and it's to honor and remember our loved ones that have gone on. So with a Dgwaagi, far back as I can remember, in our community at Bay Mills we have an old burial grounds, and we have these little spirit houses on those graves in that burial grounds, and there's little ledges on there, or there used to be, because they're getting old and they'll have to rebuild them, but a place where you could put food offerings for the person that's buried there in that space. And the word Dgwaagi itself means food for the spirits, and it's an old word used to mean cooking. And nowadays, we were just talking, there's another word that's used, like if you're going to go to the restaurant or you're going to eat at McDonald's or just have regular burgers or something. But a long time ago, or even when I was younger, Dgwaagi was when you cook for supper. So it tells us that they always thought about our relatives when they were cooking, and maybe put a little bit of food out for our loved ones that are gone on. And to do that, there's a number of different ways and ceremonies. They tell us that the Dgwaagi itself is a ceremony in and of itself, and it can be done at various times a year. Many people, especially our Dawa brothers and sisters up near Cross Village and Harbor Springs area, they have what they call ghost suppers, and they usually host them in the fall of the year. I think the government and the churches made it illegal for us to practice our old traditions, but they were able to do it on or around the church holiday of All Souls Day, which is November 1st. So they kind of did it at that time so they could get away with it, so to speak, because it was illegal. But it's usually sometime, now they do it sometime in the autumn, October, early November, mid-October, and they set the table. They cook for their relatives that have gone on, and they set the table nice, and people come in and eat and leave, and they're feeding their ancestors that have gone on before them, and that's a tradition that's hung on in that area, a Dgwaagi. Other places will have ceremonies where they cook and they put the food in the coals before they eat, and then everybody comes together and eats the food that's there. And there's protocols that go with those kind of ceremonies. They tell us when we're cooking for a spirit feast not to taste the food. It would be like giving our ancestors leftovers. We have to be mindful of the scraps after we're finished eating. If we're using paper plate products, we have to scrape the scraps into a separate bowl. Usually it's set next to the garbage can where you put your paper plates and your utensils, but you put your scraps in the bowl, and those are taken out and burned or put by a tree. They're not thrown in the regular garbage. Different communities do it differently. most communities smoke first. They use tobacco first, and they pray with the tobacco about what this is about, what this is for. And then the water will go around to everyone first. And then the head food, sometimes it's strawberries or blueberries. In our region, we use berries. This is a Anishinaabe ceremony, and our Potawatomi brothers and sisters, they use a different food, a squash, or sometimes another recipe, that corn or something that they'll use, pumpkin perhaps, for their head food, which is what they use in their area. And people try to have our traditional foods at these feasts to make offerings with for our ancestors, like wild rice and wild game, maybe deer meat or elk or moose meat, depending on how far north you are. Wild berries, something that's not been altered genetically, not GMO'd or changed up, like wild berries, or fish, wild caught fish, and corn. If you can find corn that's not been genetically altered, you get those old heirloom seeds and you grow your own heirloom corn, then you have true corn or true sweet corn or hominy. Those are good to have. Cranberries. But if you can't, I've heard people say that if all you had was lard or flour water, you could stand in front of your wood stove if you didn't have someone there to make a sacred fire, and you could put your prayers and your love into that food and the coals of that fire to feed your ancestors, because they receive the spirit of that food, and it's transformed in all the love and gratitude that we have for our life. We're putting something back for what we take, and we're feeding our ancestors and remembering them. And they can take that love out of that food, and then us humans on this earth, we depend on food, the nutrients in the food, for our energy. So we eat the food, and physically we get energized and we get healthy, and they receive the spirit of that food. They tell us when you're eating at a Dgwaagi, you're going to get hungry pretty soon, because they're going to take it out of you. And you only need to put a little bit. You wouldn't use a regular size portions. You only need a little tiny bit, and that turns into lots of food in the spirit world. And you can have a little bit of everything before you eat it. And they say not to salt the food when you're going to use it for a Dgwaagi. But you can put it on your food later after you've made your offerings. So a Dgwaagi is basically putting food offerings back for our loved ones that have gone on. It can be done any time of the year, but especially in the autumn. They say that's the time when all the leaves are falling from the trees. Our ancestors are going to go to sleep for the winter, and they won't wake up until springtime, which is their morning time. And again in the spring they can do these kind of offerings and feed our loved ones so that they don't go hungry. And so that's what a Dgwaagi is. And there's, like I said, a lot of different ways to conduct those ceremonies. Some people just do it at home with their own families. They'll make a fire and they'll cook something that they have their grandma and grandpa and their relatives that they're thinking about, and they used to eat baked beans, or they used to like hangover soup, or something. Maybe they want to do it at the morning time with oatmeal and grease on it, or bacon and eggs or something. A lot of families do that. And they put you can put it on a little piece of birch bark and make that be your dish, or you can spoon it into the coals. They say don't put it in the flames, put it in the coals, and one at a time. Not everybody up gathered around at the same time talking. There's a spirit with that fire, a mishomis, a grandfather, and just get in line. And when you're done, you face east when you're doing it, where the sun rises, with your back to the west. You put your food off, your tobacco, and your water, and then your food offerings in the coals, and you go on out the east, and the next person is his turn. If you want to send a blanket, for instance, or a pair of socks, you can put them on the table. Someone will take them home. Or maybe you might want to cut a little piece of the corner of the blanket off and burn that in the coals. The whole spirit of that will go to your loved ones. And later, you wouldn't reuse that blanket in another ceremony because it's already used. If somebody gives you a blanket at a ceremony, they're giving it to you, but the spirit of that is intended to go to their loved ones. So even if they didn't take a little piece from it. So I have this nice gift blanket somebody gave me at a Dgwaagi. I don't turn around and go and offer that as an offering to someone for help or a gift at a ceremony, because the spirit's already gone from it, even if it's a brand new blanket. See, it's used, it's empty, it's been offered already. But I can give it away like a birthday present if I wanted to, or a Christmas gift, but not as a ceremonial item. I have to get a brand new blanket. And a brand new thing means the spirit hasn't been used from it. So even if you went to the Salvation Army and you found a really good Afghan, somebody homemade, and it's in really good shape, and you know they're not going to give away a good Afghan that was a ceremonial item, or a good quilt, you can smudge that off, and you can tell if it's, you know, like you might not be able to afford a new one, but you got this good one here, you can probably use that, because chances are there aren't that many people doing Dgwaagi gifts and giving them to the Salvation Army. So that's something, that's what I mean when they say, like, the spirits, they get energy from us, and when we call on them, they need to have the energy to help us, and they depend on us to give them energy by giving thanks and putting something back for what we ask. We're all the time taking, but our tobacco helps to maintain a balance on a spiritual level, because when people, like back in the beginning, back in the day, in the dawn of the first creation, when tobacco first came onto the earth, it was because a human, Anishinaabe, fasted and he gave up his life, and his spirit was, the Creator told him, you didn't die in vain, your spirit's going to be in a new plant that will come on the earth that the people will be able to use to communicate with all creation and with me. So our thoughts and prayers can be transported by the spirit of that tobacco, that sema, gije bug, kitchi bug, that great leaf. And that's a sacrifice, and he made a sacrifice, he gave his life. So if you kill a deer, or you pick plants out of the ground and take their life, you replace it by putting your tobacco in the ground, and you're replacing a life for a life. And the same way goes when you harvest foods for your Dgwaagi ceremonies. So if worst comes to worst and all you can get is stuff at, you know, Myers or Walmart, you can smudge it off first and ask that the spirit of that plant or animal be remembered, because even though it's been processed, you ask that the spirit be put back in there, and thank those original plants and animals that gave their life up for that, you know, Kraft macaroni and cheese or whatever you have, and it'll count, because you're talking over it, and your thoughts and your intentions are what make that food sacred. So again, you know, you want to give your best stuff. You don't want to say, oh, I don't like broccoli, I'll put that out. I'll go to the feast and you're supposed to bring something to shout. I might as well bring this because I wasn't going to eat it anyway. If you do that, then that's what you're giving your ancestors and the Creator. So you want to be real careful to give your very best. Excuse me. Anyhow, that's what I've been taught about Dgwaagi, and it is an original form of tithing where you put something back for what you take. And it's our old way of doing things. Again, the people had to hide that, and that's why it didn't come down to us as openly as it should have. But many of us have memories of seeing our grandma, somebody standing there at the water or by the fire, put something in there, you know, and they did it privately or quietly, because it was illegal, and our customs have been denied us for so many generations. It takes a while for that to come back, and for people to be able to understand it in a good way. This is one of our original teachings and ceremonies that the Creator gave to us. In fact, they say that if you've been praying for someone that's ill, and let's say they're in hospital, and one of the last ceremonies that we can do is the Dgwaagi, where you'd take tobacco to people and invite them to come to your home, and you'd set the table, and you'd set a place for that sick person where they're going to sit. But if they can't get out of the hospital, you could have somebody sit and represent them. And then you'd have the man or woman that's going to lead that ceremony with their pipe. They'd be standing there with their back to the west, facing east, and all the food is brought out and put on the table. And then the first thing they do is pray. They pray with their pipe, and they put together a little dish of everything that's on that table, the food that they've cooked, to make this offering with, and whatever water or coffee, whatever they're going to use for their drink and their tobacco. And this is our last plea. We've tried everything. We've had medicine men come in. We've prayed. We've done these different ceremonies, but this is the last thing that we can do. And when we do this, they say we're turning it over to the Creator and the spirits, and we have to accept the decision from them. So we're petitioning for life for our sick loved one that's in the hospital. So we talk with our tobacco, and we make our offerings to the directions and the Mother Earth, and we explain about so-and-so is ill, and this is their Indian name, and this is what's wrong with them, and this is the kind of help we need. And so that pipe will go around, everybody seated at that table, and then they'll pour the water, and the water will go around first, and then the head food. That's the way they did it. And then everybody begins by eating what's there. They've already made that plate and that food and tobacco offering in the coals first. So we're going to eat, and we invited the spirits to come there, so they're going to eat through us. And then when we're all done, the head one just says miigwech and maybe a few more words, and miigwech, and everybody leaves and goes home. And now, whether they get better or not, that's the ceremony that the spirits are going to make the decision now. You've put it in their hands. So that's another kind of Dgwaagi, a way we can use. There's different times that we do these Dgwaagi ceremonies, and different ways of doing them for those ceremonies. Like, we know that when somebody gets named, we have a feast, and we put the food in the coals to remember the spirit of that name, the one that had that name originally, and to give thanks for this name that's coming for this individual, whether everyone eats or not. Usually people do, but they always feast that name. Or maybe it's a funeral ceremony, and there's instructions and protocols on how to do that with the one that's walking on, and the one that's conducting that funeral ceremony usually is in charge of how and when that's going to happen. There's many different ways to have that done, either big drum or madé or traditional pipe ceremonies. Different types of societies have their ways of conducting various ceremonies, including namings. There's what they used to have as clan feasts a long time ago, and they would crawl on, let's say if it was a bear clan feast, they had ways of doing things. They'd crawl on their hands and knees like a bear. What foods they could serve there, you didn't eat your own clan. So you wouldn't eat, if you were Eagle Clan, you wouldn't bring chicken or any fowl to an Eagle Clan feast. You know, you'd be a cannibal. But those are old ceremonies that are falling away now. I don't know if there's that many more that even know those old protocols for those particular clan feasts. Some of them do. The Bear Clan is hanging on tight, like they're like the last hope, you know. For those Dawa and Potawatomi people, they still have Thunder Clan. Ojibwe has Eagle, Golden Eagle. Like they used to say, Thunder Clan could eat anything. And so those are clan feasts anyway. They were held at certain times of day. I know that the Wolf Clan, I heard that the Wolf Clan feast started at midnight, ended at sunup. And so they had ways of doing things, and they'd serve berries and fish at the Bear Clan feasts. And they'd hit that bowl when they were done, and it would flip upside down, and they know that they're done with the, don't put no more food in there, they're done. So again, you know, there's different ways of doing these ceremonies. But the best thing is, like I said, we were told if all you had was cornmeal mush, you know, you don't have all the fixins and you don't have all the traditional foods and you're poor. But they tell us, when you do these kind of feasts, you'll never be hungry. You'll never go hungry. And I believe that. Even if you don't have a job, you're going to have food. So I say miigwech for those old teachings, and the best that we can do is try to do them once a year at least. If somebody's passed on, it's good to have a memorial Dgwaagi for them a year from the time they passed away. Then after that, it's in the autumn when they used to feed the ones that are gone on. Those type of Dgwaagi feasts. You could put the food out and everybody could get up and roll their own. Or you could have skabewisuk go around and serve you, and you're sitting there with your bowl. But all those different ways, that just depends on the kind of ceremony it is and where it's being done at and how they do it. And we always talk for if there's it has to be excused if we make any mistakes, or if we drop food, got to pick that food up. We always talk to be excused for that, and that's all we have to do. And they're so grateful. Even fasting is a form of Dgwaagi, because they tell us that what we would have eaten and what we would have drank and the friendship we would have shared with someone, or the love, we are restricting ourselves from that. And if it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days, whatever we're giving up, we're giving all that to our helpers and the Creator and our ancestors, and they get it. So I just think that we have a lot of love for our relatives that are gone on, and we won't forget them. And this is a way for us to share our love. So that's the end of part 1. Miigwech.